Okay. Let me come and stand where Jason is. Jason's done such a fabulous job. I'm now going to try and do the other side of it. He's done the human part of it, and I'm going to try and do the digital part of it. If that works for you. And so I was sort of trying to work out where best to start with this particular question about big data. There's a post which I came across recently about what big data was, which somebody added to a presentation which I was talking about. And I looked at the quote, and it's just coming through in your group chat, and I thought that's exactly it. What happens is every few years, the big consultancies find something which they want to try and sell to us, and they come along and frighten us with big data. But I want to try and break it all down in about 5 minutes and show you how we can use the information we have around us to try to make sure that we can actually provide the levels of care which have been described by Jason. So that's my plan. I also want to give you one or two more, we call them performance enhancement tools, like the barriers thing which you did, which will allow you to go and work with your colleagues or come back on Cube and work with your colleagues together to make it work for you. First story, when I started Penn School 25 years ago, at the end of my first year, I had a meeting with my accountant. I got so grown up. And so what happened was we went into this meeting to look at the annual report. And he brought out all this documentation and he talked me all through it. And I was really disappointed. Because you see, I didn't realize that everything he was going to do in the accounting process was about looking at the past. All he did was he told me what we'd done the year before, and he told me how we'd done it and how that happened. But what I really needed to know was what was going to happen in the future and how I might make that happen. And unfortunately, none of that happened in that meeting. Now, there's a reason I'm telling you that, because in a world which is changing really fast, it's really crucial for all of us to understand what's happening around us and what we need to do about it and how we can go about making those first steps which Jason talked about. So how does this link to big data? You see, there's a real headache because data itself is a bit of a con. People talk about data, but I'll tell you a story. I once did a conference for information professionals and I went on the stage. And when I went on the stage, I said, I shouldn't be here, guys, because I think I'm a bit of a fraud. And they said, there was sort of a buzz in the audience. And I said, I think I'm really a fraud because I don't know what information is. And they said, I said, put your hands up. If I say 42, is that information? Some of the hands went up. Not all the hands. So I know they don't know what information is. So I said, what's missing? So somebody said, 42 what? So I said, 42 old. Years old, okay? Put your hands up. The hands which were up went down. Others swapped around. So now I knew that they didn't know what information was. And I said, what's missing? And somebody said, what's 42 years old? I said, perfect. You ask a question, we add to it some data, and from that we get information. And the information then tells us what to do and how to do it. So this is the big challenge for us. Data actually is of no use to us at all, let alone big data. The thing we've got to focus on is what questions do we need to be asking in order to be able to work out exactly what to do. You saw from Jason's what's important to me. It was the question which drove everything. So the formula we tend to use is we say, if you want to reduce your workload and make your organization work better and your patients work better, have a look at how you're spending your time. Most people in organizations spend most of their time reporting on what's happened in the past. Lots and lots of reports about what's happened and so on. The reports usually don't answer any questions, not easily. What you do instead, if you want to be more effective, is you focus on what are the questions I want to ask about the future in terms of what should I do next, and what are the questions I want to ask about how I should do things differently in the future. And we have one of the tools we use, and I'm not going to have enough time to sort of take you through it, but I will sort of introduce you to it, called Reportage, which allows us to do as a brainstorm, what are the really crucial questions we must ask? So that for me is where you start. And if you discover that your current reporting, management, and meetings do not answer those questions, stop doing them. You'll find your life gets much, much better. So that's the first part of the story I wanted to tell you. The second part is to move into this idea of big data, assuming, of course, that there is such a thing. Actually, I have to let you in on a little bit of a secret. For most of us, almost all data is big. One of the companies I worked with is a telecoms company, and they explained to me something which really shocked me. Apparently, right now, when I'm talking and I'm trying to present to you, by talking and using pictures, I'm transferring data to you at between sort of 1 and 100 megabits per second. That's how many words and ideas are going on. Apparently, if you're in an organization, what you discover is because most meetings are sequential, people don't write sticky notes and put them all up at the same time. One person talks, then the next person, then we ask for clarification. What that means is that the speed with which you can get information to the decision makers is limited at about 10 megabits per second. Why am I telling you this? Because it's a definition of big data. Big data is basically when you produce data, ways of trying to make sure that the data is processed. What I'm trying to explain is, for most organizations, having any answers at all, any information is big data. But the big data allows us to do something else. It allows us to look at huge data sets, but analyze them in a different way. So no longer are we stuck because we can't actually process all the data. We can do something else with it. You see, traditionally, the route we've used is to say, okay, let's figure out what data we need from the questions. We put them together, and we try and make them turn into something. This little diagram says, you can see it says questions on one side, and it says data on the other side, and you put them together, you get your information. The information gives you intelligence, so you go, what else should I be asking about for next year? And then from there, you can build an intuition, and if you've got a day-to-day way of working, it gives you more questions. How else could we help the children? What other things should we ask about what's important to you? But the challenge we have now is that there's too much of it. And so there's a whole new area which has arisen where people try and use mathematics to crunch through the data to give you new intelligence. And that's what big data is about. I'll let you in on the most important message from this session. Keep the data means you have to guess how the data should be analyzed. So what happens is people come to you and they say, we'll take all your data and we'll give you insights. It might work, but it's really important that you make sure they explain exactly how they're going to do that insight generation. Otherwise, you will get information which actually isn't correct. And I'll just go back to my earlier joke about 42 years old. How old are you, Eddie? 42 years old. The thing is, I'm not 42 years old. So although it's information, it's actually completely the wrong information. And so the net result of that is you have to be very, very careful. I've got another diagram, and I will just put it up there. It's got a lot of stuff on there, but what I've tried to do is update the challenges we have for the sort of 21st century, and I'll put this up here and just walk you through it, and I'll point so you can see where I'm leading, and that might help a little bit. So what happens is, in the old days, we would just worry about the very, very simple idea that we'd have to work out what questions, and then we'd work our way from there to the data. But what happens now is, it's not enough just to have the questions and the data. We can get big data sets, try to work them through. Those give us new questions. We put the questions together with the big data sets. From that, we get our information, which allows us to be able to understand both things which help us operate better and also give us some insight and intuition to the future. I want to stop there and just see whether there are any questions coming through for me at that point. And if there aren't, then I'll give you, quote, your homework to take away and do. There are no questions coming through, so I'll give you the takeaways from this session. Step 1, most crucially important. Please, when you go back to work, have a look at the next meeting you go to. As you go into the meeting, ask yourself and make a list, what are the questions that this meeting has to answer for me? So start with that. And then next to that, write out what data do I need to collect to make sure that this information is going to be, this meeting is going to be useful to me. And if you go into the meeting and as you go through the meeting, you tick off the answers to the questions you took into the meeting, life will be good. If you go into the meeting and you come out of the meeting and in the meeting absolutely nothing which you were hoping to answer has been answered, find nice ways of not going to that meeting again. So that's my first big takeaway. Second big takeaway, don't let anyone hype you about big data. It's very, very simple. And if they're trying to hype you, please ask them how they're doing their analysis to work out their questions. If you do that, you'll always be a step ahead of them, because then they'll have to explain it, and then you'll understand. If you don't, it'll look like magic, and you'll have to follow their recommendations even though you don't understand them. So those are my two big takeaways. I'm going to stop at that point because I think our time is a little bit tight. Tam?
Okay, thank you. Eddie, big round of applause for Eddie.
Bravo.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just before we move up to the room again, any final questions for Jason at all? Anyone? You can type them in or shout them out for your mics off, switch.
Oh yeah, the question is the very first part of any meaningful data structure. It's not witchcraft. Thank you. Absolutely. That you said it. I took longer. I could have just said that. If there aren't any other questions, should we look and just check whether we've actually achieved? Yeah. Oh, there's another really nice one here. Let's abandon meeting agendas. Oh yes, please. If you think about how we run this session, we've used your hopes and fears to try and influence and inform what we've done. So Jason and I had prepared sessions, but because we knew what you wanted from your hopes and fears, we actually managed to try and answer your questions a little bit better. And we shall prove that when we go back to the small demo whiteboard, where you're all going to have to go on your own because you're all experts at Cube now. Nobody's going to drag you. So if you click on the Play Small Demo Whiteboard, we can have a look at the hopes and fears, and maybe we'll discover something about how much time and environmental improvements we've made during the session. So just click on the place called Small Demo.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
I keep just looking at what we were talking about today. We wanted to talk about learning to use a new tool, and I think a lot of people have found a way of using a new tool. Can I hear some? I can hear some yeses.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
yes. Just make your head shout yes.
Or nods.
Don't be
I
shy.
can't. Unfortunately, I haven't got eyes in the back of my head like Eddie, so I can't see that way. Did you feel that you actually engaged in meeting people today? Did you actually feel that people you'd never met, you've actually interacted with in a way that you would have if you'd met them at a conference or something?
Yes, it's a really useful exercise.
Now, what we heard from Jason was fantastic in terms of the idea of person-centered care. I think if we look at that and how we get that communication over, I know teams working together on the shop floor, in the wards and out within the community is actually the way to go. And one of the things that Tam's been doing is actually building teams on Cube that can work together and actually progress and share stories. And sharing stories is so powerful, especially when you're dealing with the patients and their carers. I mean, it speaks volumes to people when you tell the story we just heard today. And you'll be back in your office in 2 minutes or 3 minutes' time, having been away for a conference. And I have a colleague of mine today, sat in Inverness, who's probably not going to get home because of Abigail's storm. And he's been there for 2 days speaking to a small group of people rather than being in this meeting, which is unfortunate. Eddie, did you want to say anything?
On that basis, yes, just a nice link there. We asked you where you were, and you put it on this on the map for us, and we've been calculating how far we would have had to have traveled. Josh, can you sort of summarize that for us? Is it possible? Okay. I should have calculated for us how far we've traveled. So if you look at ever so slightly to your right, it's just a spreadsheet running in the background, and we've used it to work backwards from where everyone is, the actual distance we're going to be traveling. So we've traveled something like 7,400 miles. Yeah, 7,400 miles. If we'd had to if we'd spent our time, instead of actually just meeting virtually, if instead we decided that we were going to drive, it would have taken each of us, I think it says 4.25 hours, because I think we've got people from Brazil as well as other sides of the world, as well, so that sort of pushes the averages up a little bit. And at the same time as doing that, we have managed to save ourselves trees. And who can guess how many trees we saved just by doing this? Who can guess how many trees we saved? Any
3.
ideas? 3? No, more than 3. Go more than 3.
107.
20.
No, more than 20.
A forest.
We saved a small forest. Yeah. So anyway, we saved ourselves something like 30 trees, and we could have heated a house, so I think 3 houses for about a year, something like that. So we made a huge difference just in this small session. I put us in a circle just so that we can wrap up together. I'm going to pass back to David Lomas, who kicked us off, who's probably going to ask Tammy for the next steps, and then close.
Yeah, Tammy, before we close, have you got any wise words? And then we've got some questions for you right at the end. Tammy, did you want to say anything before we close?
No, we have another event hopefully in December where we're just going to get together and do a bit of networking around innovation and open innovation. It'd be really good if you could look at the partner stands. They've put quite a bit of effort into their stands. They've partnered today and also are really involved in the open innovation. So if you get a chance at the end to go and look there and speak to them, that would be really good. Any questions on CUBE and the NHS, just ping me an email and I'll get back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Eddie, to our speakers. There's lots more. I wanted to thank you for your participation and your contribution. We've got all the ideas that were captured in the breakout sessions. Leo is throwing up on the screen now some questions. It'd be really, really useful if you could just give us your answers to those questions. I know some people may have to leave. We've just hit 11 o'clock. But please do answer those before you leave, and that will give us some great feedback. And we hope to see you all again soon at the next CubeX event. So thank you for coming. A big round of applause for everyone for all your help. Cheers, guys.
I wouldn't say I was sceptical, but after the initial couple of sessions, I was really quite hooked on it, and it's made it a lot, get speedy decisions and outcomes and action-focused things out your meeting, which is great. There seems to be much more putting whiteboards, etc., rather than trying to find a corner, in the real world.
I didn't find it difficult. I didn't find it complicated.
Somebody tie Eddie to a chair quickly.
Just live dangerously, why don't you?